One, two, three.
The Local Youth Worker is a podcast brought to you by Reformed Youth Ministries. Since 1972, RYM has sought to reach and equip youth for Christ, and this podcast seeks to reach and equip those parents and youth workers who share that same desire. For more information on our student conferences, youth leader training, or resources, visit rym.org.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Local Youth Worker, a podcast brought to you by Reformed Youth Ministries. I'm your host, John Parrott. This is episode 367, and I'm here with Greg and actually Brad, and we'll talk to Brad in just a minute, but I'm here with Greg Meyer. Greg, how's it going?
It's going pretty well, John.
We are here at Laguna Beach Christian Retreat Center in Panama City Beach at High School Week 1. Something I've been meaning to say, too, to those who listen. We know the audio is a little different than what it typically is, so we hope that you're able to listen to these all right. And as we're sitting here recording, we said it pre-recording, the air conditioning can be loud in this room, and we're in these horribly squeaky chairs, so we'll see if it picks up any of that. Greg, I'd love for you to share an essential book for youth ministry for us. Do you have? And Greg just got done teaching an elective too, so his mind might be a little shot, but what are some thoughts of an essential book for youth ministry?
Is it okay if I just give like quick hits on a few?
Sure, yeah,
totally.
I don't
have one big one. I'll say one. This is probably a popular one. Is Sustainable Youth Ministry? Is that Mark DeVries?
Mark DeVries.
Yeah,
that's right.
So that was a really helpful book, just for me learning how to just structure a youth ministry and the things that you need to be thinking about more broadly. So it's a book I've given out to folks. I try to remember the one Walt Mueller book with the guy skateboarding on it. Was that one?
Yeah, Engaging the Soul of Youth Culture.
Yes, when he talked about just how you kind of taking an Acts 17 posture towards just observing the culture of your students and reinforcing that it's cross-cultural mission work you're doing when you're doing youth ministry. One that's not really about youth ministry. There's the Trellis and the Vine. I don't remember the guys, the two Australian guys, right?
I'm forgetting the names too, yeah.
But that is just in terms of how you prioritize discipleship, in terms of making sure your ministry is about discipling leaders who will disciple leaders, and not so focused so much on building the structures that you forget that. And so that was really a helpful book. And there was one other that I was thinking about. Oh, this is in one book, but a guy named Tim Elmore in a group called Growing Leaders has done a lot of stuff on social emotional learning.
Okay. And
so he's come out with a bunch of different books about Gen Z and other stuff like that I found really helpful in terms of just teaching more effectively to Gen Z and just to students.
That's good. Yeah. So yeah, when you were talking about Walt Mueller's book, I was thinking, we have a class at RTS that we teach every other year, and that's essential reading. I mean, we've got that assigned for that class, and what's interesting is just, it's 2021, I think was the last time that class was taught, and the students in that class were still talking about how relevant that book is today, and I cannot remember if that was back in early 2000s when that book came out.
I don't know, but I just remember him talking about like MTV and like iPods, and so
yeah.
It makes me happy because
that's right. It can be dated in some spots, but still just so applicable and helpful to youth workers. The other books are great as well. That's one that just we obviously love Walt Mueller at RYM, and he's been on this podcast many times, and I appreciate his work. But Greg, thanks for that. Right now, here's our Arrested Development segment with Scott and Linda. Hey everybody, welcome back to Arrested Development. I'm here with Linda Oliver. Linda, how's it going?
Pretty well.
All right, and Scott Bird.
Doing good, John.
We are here at our Florida conference, Middle School Florida. And I just want to say this too. I don't know if this is going to be repeated in some other segment, but I know the audio quality isn't the same that we typically have, as we've said, our insanely good studio quality of the Local Youth Worker that we typically have. But yeah, we're trying to figure this out on the road and still be able to get you all content out there. Linda and Scott, it's funny, we're talking about kind of the rest and work balance, and you're halfway through a middle school conference. Linda, how are you feeling? Just fatigue-wise, sleep-wise? Are you resting at all in this insane week?
Yeah, I mean, my body definitely feels a little more tired. I believe that I ate something with dairy in it, which because I tend to get a sore throat and like a little bit of drainage from that, and I'm feeling a little bit of that. So either that or something's good. But this is what I feel like when I eat dairy. So that has me a little bit dragging.
Well, I'm glad we can get you to talk more to help your sore throat. Yeah, Scott, how are you feeling?
I'm pretty tired. Yeah, and you might can tell my voice is pretty shot. But yeah, it's good. I'm also feeling kind of some, nasal stuff. One of the kids told me I snored all night last night, so there's something going on there. Yeah. But feeling okay.
Yeah, and we all have some form of caffeine in front of us right now, right? Is that tea?
Yeah, this is my second tea of the day, but I don't think this one has caffeine in it.
Okay.
I drank green tea first. This has turmeric in it, which sounds healthy. So
yeah, it is. Yeah, I've heard that's.
It is.
It
yeah.
seems like it's one of those like miracle foods, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a spice or a season or something? What is it exactly?
Yeah. You can use it as seasoning.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can take it just straight pill form, which I also do.
Ah, smart. There you go. Well, that's all the time we have for today. So,
health tips from Linda.
No, I thought, as we're doing this Rested Development segment, we've had AJ Swoboda, Kelly Kapic, Dan Doriani, but I thought it'd be good too, just let's talk kind of practically youth ministry and just ministry in general of, how we try to maintain this rest and work balance. And I know there's not a balance. I know it's impossible this side of heaven. I want to say that it's not like we can, get this figured out. But maybe a way to begin this is just kind of talking about, your schedule at the office. Sometimes I think it's helpful. I know it was for me, at least when I was doing youth ministry, just to talk to other youth workers. Hey, what does your week look like? What do you do? Sometimes it's hard when, students are in class all day long and you're just kind of in the office. It's like, how can I best spend my time? Maybe just kind of starting there. Linda, you can go first if you want, then Scott. What does kind of your in-office time look like in the week? Like stuff away from students. What do you try to do in the office? And then Scott, you can pick up after Linda.
Yeah, so I guess it first of all depends on what meetings I have, because I'll tend to have like a meeting just about youth stuff, and then a meeting every week with the whole church staff. Every other week there's like leadership team meetings, and sometimes I'm meeting with someone I supervise about stuff. So, and then I also meet with my supervisor once a week. So those tend to fill up like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday a bit. And then other than that, it's a lot of, I'm not one of the people that's like, oh, well, I always do lesson prep on this day or what. Like, it really just depends. So I don't know. Yeah, lesson prep, like getting things together for all of the things that are coming up. Like, I mean, a lot of it recently has been getting the details together and out to parents for this trip, and then resending it to them because it got lost in the black hole of their email, and resending it again because they still can't find it. Yeah, I don't know if I have like a very good way to describe all of that, but yeah, I don't know if you have more to say, Scott.
Yeah, I hate this question because students always ask me, what do you do during the day? I'm like, well,
nothing, because everything just puts itself together.
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of do usually have a little bit of a doing the same thing so Mondays usually I start to think about the lesson for Wednesday night. Tuesdays kind of more kind of research, planning it out, and then Wednesday, a lot of Wednesday is dedicated to just kind of filling out the main lesson for Wednesday night. So that's kind of part of what I do. I meet with youth staff on Monday afternoons, the whole church staff on Mondays as well. So Mondays are a lot of meetings. You usually try to get with a student. We aim for two one-on-ones is good for the week, and then 3 is great. So that's kind of our goal. So usually out of the office by like 3:45, something like that. But usually, if Wednesday nights, I usually take a longer lunch just to have time with my family because I'm missing out. Bedtime is the most exhausting time of the day. It seems like trying to get the kids in bed, and so my wife is doing that by herself, and so I just try to stay home and try to help get the kids in bed for naps and that kind of thing. Just try to help out where I can on those days. So it's kind of it.
Yeah, no, and I'm curious too. Well, I guess I'll ask that one in a little bit. But yeah, Scott, you and I used to work together, and I know oftentimes we would talk about the importance of reading, for our job. That sometimes early on we can feel guilty of, okay, we're youth workers, we should be with the youth, but we're sitting in an office with a book and we're reading right now. And so I'm curious, Linda, do you do that? Scott, do you do that? Do you take time, to research youth culture, to read any just kind of pastoral book? Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like kind of in your weekly schedule.
Yeah, what I've started to do in the past year or so is just have it on my to-do for every day that I have 15 minutes I set aside just to read. And sometimes I'll find like larger pockets, but there's some book I'm reading or whatever that 15 minutes, not on Sundays, because Sundays is our program day. We don't have programs on Wednesday nights, but Monday through Thursday, I've got 15 minutes set aside each of those days that I'm just going to read.
Yeah, reading is work for me. I'm not a good reader. I heard John Piper one time say that he can only read as fast as he can form words in his mouth. I was like, yes, that's me. I'm a slow reader, and so it's work for me to do it, but I need to do it. And so one of the things that makes me do it is reading through a book with our youth staff. And so I know every week in our staff meeting, this is something you did, John, with us when I worked with you, but every week in staff meeting, we're going to talk about what it was that we read. And so that keeps me kind of moving and going. But also, I just started this full focus planner. Have y'all heard of this? It's Michael Hyatt. Yeah. And so he makes you pick 3 goals for kind of the quarter, and then you pick 3 goals for the week, 3 things that you want to accomplish, and then 3 goals every day. So if you do these 3 goals, you've had a successful day. And so I've got something coming up in September that I need to do some reading on. And so that's one of my goals for this quarter is to read that book. And so anyway, it's helpful, I think, to put that as one of the goals. Like, I want to read this book by this time, and then every week you can kind of look at that and see how you're doing on those bigger goals.
Yeah, that was something that reading. Yeah, I just more and more became convinced. And yeah, everything you just said, Scott. I'm not a strong reader. I'm a slow reader. Sometimes I can enjoy it. Other times it can be more work. But I just became convinced, especially as the issues from same-sex attraction to cutting to all sorts of things where I realized, man, we've got to be reading to know how to counsel these students, how to get proper help to these students. And so something I know that we would do is always have a book with us, especially when we were going to pick up students or meet a student, because youth workers who are listening to this know sometimes teenagers cancel their plans with you. Sometimes they don't show up. When we planned our week around it, we were ready, we're there, and then they don't show up. And so, if one of the staff members was meeting at a coffee shop and the student didn't show up, the youth worker just, pulls the book out and reads whatever it is and spends, an hour there. And so that doesn't throw off their whole routine, their whole schedule. And you're able to kind of fit that into other pockets of time. And as you were talking about that planner too, I was thinking someone who's been on this podcast and who also wrote the track booklet, A Student's Guide to Gaming, is Reagan Rose, and he runs Redeeming Productivity. And I just think that's a helpful website. Everyone needs to check out periodically, sign up for his newsletter. But he just sends out, and he's got a podcast too, so listening to that. But he has so many helpful, kind of like you said, accomplishing 3 tasks in a day or a week or whatever, just ways to think about being productive, but also not kind of a guilt and shaming of needing to do more in each and every day. Anyway, it's really helpful. So that's a resource I want to point people to. talk just a little bit about maybe weekly programs. Let's talk about weekly programs that you guys typically have in your schedule. Linda, what does your typically kind of time with students look like?
Yeah, so during the school year, we have what's basically a Sunday school that's middle school and high school combined. And then Sunday evenings, we do a middle school, like kind of hybrid large group, small group program where we do part of it all together, like worship and game and whatnot. And then we split them into small groups, followed immediately by the high school program. And the high schoolers get dinner in their program. And in terms of like other programs we regularly do with students, like there's really nothing else during the week. We have a Christian school that's attached to our church, and sometimes we can plan things with students during their lunch periods. And so they'll come up to our like youth ministry space and hang out with us. Occasionally we've like served them pizza and whatnot. But I wouldn't really consider those necessarily programs. More often I'm actually like walking through lunch, finding students and just chatting with them. But yeah, those are really our basic programs, unless it's like a special week that we have like an extra event or something.
Yeah, I think ours is probably pretty similar. We have Sunday school, and then we do small groups on Sunday afternoons where we, each small group is doing something different, but the goal of those small groups is more fellowship and connection than any kind of teaching or whatever. But and then Wednesday night is our large group. That's kind of our main big thing, and that's from students show up after school, so that's like 4:00 to about 7:30. They're there. So
that's helpful. Look, what I want to get into is students' activities that you go to, extracurricular things. What I was thinking is, it's kind of getting close to time on this one. Maybe next week, let's pick up with this and let's look at, okay, how do you maintain a balance of going to student activities, but then we'll get a little bit more into kind of the rest aspect of ministry. What are some practical things you guys try to do to pull away from ministry at times? But I think it's helpful just to kind of, again, share schedules, talk about some things that have worked and haven't worked this week. So I guess focused a little bit more on work this week, but then next week kind of get into the rest aspect more. So Linda, Scott, thanks for your time. I look forward to talking to you more next week. Hey everybody, I am back here with Greg Meyer and Brad Robson. We are in Laguna Beach together. And it's funny, we record these out of sequence, and I know I kind of already said some of that anyway, but we're in a room that's not the best. Could have some interruptions. Some people could walk in. We've got really squeaky chairs. But Greg, look, I know you've been on the podcast before. Brad, you have not. Why don't you just, where you are, where you're serving, how long you've been there, maybe family.
Awesome. Okay. My name is Brad Robson. I'm from IPC, Independent Presbyterian Church in Memphis, Tennessee. We are a PCA church, not an independent church. We used to be an independent church, but we are a PCA church since 2000. I've been at IPC. This is my 12th summer.
Wow.
So just at my 11th year anniversary there. Love Memphis, love our church. It's a great spot. Love our students. Married and have 2 kids, a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we're just loving it.
Awesome, man. Yeah, congrats on summer 12 for you. That's an accomplishment.
Feels like a milestone.
Yes. Well, look, this summer, those who listen know that we've been talking about just a lot of various things youth ministry related. And we'll get into some FAQs. Something that we have been talking about as well is pro tips. So I don't know, Brad or Greg, who wants to go first on a youth ministry pro tip. But Greg, why don't you go? You got pro tip for us.
Brad threw the mic over, so I'm going to get it going. A couple, and this may be particularly for those who are jumping into a new church or starting off, but this is something as I look back at my time, I really just make the first 6 months to a year focusing on building relationships with students and with families. not being in too much of a rush to make big, programmatic or structural changes. And I think that's kind of a heart posture too. I know I was in a hurry to feeling a little insecure, wanting to be the leader and feeling that pressure, but also just not really putting the emphasis and the focus in the place that maybe it should have been. And then along the lines of that, and I've given this advice to other people too, is after you've done that, after you spent that time, started building those relationships, in the background, something you can be doing if you haven't done it already. And this advice I got from a friend is clarify what your own personal philosophy of ministry is. Maybe some bullet points of this is what I'm about. And some of it is maybe, if we're talking about the PCA, that might be aligned with your denomination or whatever. But some of it may just be personal to you and how you want to do youth ministry, how it fits your church and community, wherever you live in your context. And start to clarify that and have conversations about that, so that, hey, this is what's driving and leading me, and then seeing how that meshes with the church's overall vision and mission, because you're really wanting to pull in the same direction as the church you're at, and so having that vision and mission aligned with where the church is going. And so that's a process you can do in the background, and then once you're clarifying how you want to do ministry, how you're feeling called to do it, what your church is about, then you can make, and you have the relationships, you can make those programmatic and structural decisions much better. And so that's some advice I would give, just a pro tip, especially for those starting out. And even if you've been somewhere for a while, you can always step back and do that kind of work.
Mm-hmm. Now that's helpful. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying philosophy of ministry, because I can remember coming on staff, and early on as I'm starting youth ministry, and really early on when I was an intern in college, I was just like, okay, I can throw a Frisbee and I'm doing youth ministry. And then when people started saying philosophy of ministry, I was like, what is philosophy? What does that even mean?
This guy can hammer throw. We're all good.
No, yeah. And then not anymore. The shoulders aren't what they used to be. But yeah, just philosophy of ministry. I mean, just people out there hearing that. Some people know what you're talking about, but just, your basic kind of beliefs and how you want to go about kind of the discipleship process. And so if somebody's listening, they haven't done that, that's a good place to start. Just like you said, kind of bullet point some things. And then, like you said, look at the overarching kind of philosophy of the church and the culture and fitting in there. So that's helpful. Brad, when you hear pro tip, is there anything that comes to mind in your years of ministry?
Yeah, I think I heard you say that someone recently on the podcast had said, don't take yourself too seriously.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that's just in youth ministry. That's just golden.
Yeah.
Just being here this week at RYM at Florida, when kids get up and walk away, it's okay to just get up and walk with them. They're not making a statement that they don't want to be with you. And so just, not taking yourself too seriously, just following students around. I think another big thing that I've learned just over the years is knowing which hills you're willing to die on.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes earlier in ministry, there were hills that I died on that I should have probably just not died on.
Yes.
If that makes sense. Just little things that weren't a big deal that I made into big things, and it can just ruin your relationship with students or with staff. And so that's one thing. I think for those of us too who are on big staffs or staffs that have multiple youth workers or volunteers, to highlight the gifts of the people that are working with you and for you. And being willing to do things that that are outside of your comfort zone, so that other people can shine in the things that they're gifted in, and really being able to work hard to make sure that the people who work with you are well cared for and have an opportunity to shine at what they excel at is an important thing.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I know and I think I've said something like this on the podcast. Like early on, I was very territorial of the youth ministry and my students, and kind of me wanting just to do it all on my own. But the older I got and the more my energy started to wane, I was like, I need some other people helping me out, and to be able to have, like you said, other people that you can highlight their gifts and realize they can connect with the student better than I can.
I oftentimes tell my staff, when I leave for vacation, sometimes we go to Maine in the summers and we'll be gone for 2 weeks. And as a youth worker, that's kind of scary to leave for 2 weeks, but my boss has let me, which is a wonderful thing. But I often get back and I tell my staff, I'm like, things are much better without me. I'm working myself out of a job.
Yeah.
But really, good leaders equip the people who work with them to excel. And so that's an important part of ministry too.
Yeah, so true. And I'm already forgetting, what was your second one that you said? I need more coffee today. You said, no, don't take yourself too seriously. And then
know which hills to die on.
Yes. Okay. That was, because I just look back sometimes and I cringe at thinking of, man, why did I make such a big deal out of this? I should have just let that go.
I've mellowed out a lot more in ministry. Like, I'm okay leaving a room unclean when I leave RYM. Like, I'm sure John doesn't like hearing that, but
I don't care.
Around clean up the room. Like, you're terrible. Like, the kids won't like you. And so, trying to clean up the, and so I think the longevity helps too. And so, like, as much, God calls people to different places at different times, but as much as if you have the opportunity to be in a place for a long time and to get to know people and families and parents, I'm just seeing that pay major dividends down the road at my church. And so those are just a few thoughts.
Yeah, that's good. And that last part, just the relational aspect, which, Greg, that was tying into what you're saying of just, taking the time to get to know the students and get to know the families. That's ministry, getting in people's lives. Well, that's some helpful pro tips, guys. I know we've got a list of, about 20 questions here that we've just kind of compiled from other youth workers, some frequently asked questions. And I think right before we started recording, one of y'all said maybe something about a teaching technique. So the question is, what's a teaching technique that's been really helpful in youth ministry? Greg or Brad, do you want to jump in, Greg?
Yeah, I'll jump in. And I know that y'all interviewed Tasha Chapman.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So listen to that.
The guru of
That's
teaching.
My
Yes.
first, no, she's coming. She did a workshop with since we're in St. Louis, where she is coming to seminary. She's coming, done a workshop with our leaders, and a lot of our leaders have been seminary students, so they've gotten to sit under her teaching, but. Being realistic about the amount of content to cover.
Yes.
Not to say we want to give, theologically rich teaching, but just also understanding, having an appreciation for learning styles and developmental stage. And some of those things are, what Tasha talks a lot about is having a learning objective of what's the goal in this time together, and being realistic about the amount of content you can actually communicate. So we've had curriculum for Sunday school and other things that we've used that it's just like 3 or 4 times as much content that really can be really engaged with. And that's really the goal that Tasha talks about, is your goal is learner engagement. And that they're engaged by, like if you're up and you're teaching or you're in a conversation, if people are, the body language tells you if they're engaged or not and if they're asking questions. And then something else Tasha talks about too is just asking good questions. And she's got a whole thing about that. And so often the questions we ask are actually discouraging engagement and response. And so that's something as well. And going along with that, just finding ways to appeal to all different types of learners, not just, and this is our churches too, but we're so geared towards auditory learning and sermons and lectures. And honestly, that's one way of teaching. It's not even always the best way. And we have flexibility as a youth ministry. Everything doesn't have to be a sermon and a lecture. So thinking about ways to introduce just visual aspects. Years ago, I started, having a slides for what I'm doing, and some of it has just, this can be kind of fun. You can put memes and GIFs in there that are related to whatever you're talking about. You can show clips of videos. You can. And some that takes time, and not everybody's, that doesn't come as natural to everybody. But you're giving them something to look at while they're hearing you, and then creating times where they can engage as well. One of the things Tasha talks about is think, pair, share. You give them something to think about on their own. They share it with their neighbor, or they pair up, and then they share it with the group. And so you're doing that learner engagement, giving them things to write on during the lessons. That's kinetic engagement, hands-on, because most of our kids are not auditory learners. And so if we really want to maximize the teaching and conversation time we have, we really need to be sensitive to those things. And that's something I've had to grow in, and we really build a lot of space for that. And just having freedom to be flexible. Like you have more flexibility in youth group because it's not a worship service. Yeah. And so you can do different things in that time. And so those would be some teaching techniques. And then some people are better at this than others, but trying to be as much of like not having the barrier of your notes or your laptop that be between you and students, as much as you're able to kind of step aside from that, or just be very direct and vulnerable with them.
Yeah.
And that takes time as well. But all of those things are just an increased engagement, and are just going to make increase the quality of the time you have with students. So those are a few things that have developed over time, and that goes back to the stuff I mentioned before about social emotional learning. Thinking about your small group time is not just time to process the data they've just received, but to learn how to relate to one another, to learn how to listen, to learn how to share vulnerably, to learn how to ask questions, and we've said this before, that might be the only time in the week where our students, or even us sometimes, are having that kind of interaction with people. And so we're offering something just in the nature of it that's really, really powerful and needed in a culture and a generation where so much of our interaction is mediated by screens.
Yeah,
and it's valuable.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Increasingly our students are just not getting that kind of interaction. I mean, sadly, there's not a lot of. There are dinner tables in the homes, but oftentimes everyone's so busy they're not sitting down having that kind of interaction. So small group time can be that. And let me also remind people, Tasha Chapman was on episode 356 if people want to go back and listen to that, because as I think of a teaching technique, I can remember early on, and I think I've said this before too, it's as I'm teaching students, I was thinking, I've never been taught really how to teach. And you just kind of learn things through the years, and asking questions is such an easy way to just engage students. But like Greg said, Tasha has some good questions to ask, so you're not putting students on the spot or making them feel threatened or whatever. So that's really helpful. Brad, did you have a teaching technique that you've thought of?
Yeah, I think just flowing from some of the things that Greg said, like knowing what you want to say and being able to say it in one sentence is super important. Less is more.
Yeah.
I think also, keeping I think I've heard someone say, make the main point the main point, and don't really say much more. I think it's super helpful too. So youth ministry is a safe place to fail. And so most of our, it's okay to try things that you maybe wouldn't try in corporate worship. For instance, the barriers that we have, it's better to be able to be more relatable and not be a prison to your notes. And so youth ministry is usually a safe place to do some of that. Unless you have an elder sitting in the back of the room or something like that. But yeah, I've learned more and more keeping the main point, and just kind of sticking to it, or I heard someone say the KISS rule, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
And so for me, most of our students aren't coming in ready to listen to a 30-minute academic lesson. And so being able to tell stories, to be relatable, to have conversation, I think that those things are all very valuable, and you have to be willing to risk some things and try some things, but less is more, and keeping it simple is great.
Yeah, I think that's good. And as you said, the elder in the room. I can remember when I first started teaching, I was just doing a Wednesday night lesson, and then all of a sudden this ruling elder walks in right before we began. I'm like, what is he doing here? Oh my goodness! And I was terrified that he's in this. And he was super kind and gracious, but I was just so intimidated to have him in the room, because that's something, as you're teaching, you're kind of thinking about your audience, and I'm thinking, okay, students, and all of a sudden a ruling elder walks in, so that kind of threw me. But yeah, going back to your point on simplicity, and then students, I just think more and more the importance of small groups, because our students, they're in classes all day long listening to lectures, and when they show up on Wednesday night or whatever night it is, we don't want to give them another lecture. Let's sit down, open the Word together, and read through it. So I just think that's important in teaching. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, and I think too, for us in Sunday school, oftentimes I feel like we're tempted to make it like church 2.0, and it's okay to be to think outside of the box. What are some different things we can teach, or what are some different ways that we can organize this hour that we have? It doesn't need to be singing, lesson for 20 minutes, prayer. You can do a variety of different things on a Sunday morning, and so we emphasize a lot of just fellowship, and so we kind of give students a lot of time just to be together. We look for ways to kind of foster that, through forced fun, so things you have to do, but also things that just having the room open and having lots of different things for lots of different people.
Yeah.
So not everyone's comfortable walking into a room and just being like, oh, there's 50 people in here. Who am I going to go talk? So we have things that they can color, things that they can write, things that they can play with their hands. And so we do all that on Sunday morning as well. But I guess that kind of was a rabbit trail.
No, that's a helpful rabbit trail. I mean, that's something as a few weeks ago, we were doing essentials of a youth room. And I know that point was made a couple of times of having something, for the students to do with their hands or whatever when they walk in. It just makes the room more inviting and comfortable. And so I think that's a good point. And the whole Church 2.0 thing, that's something we need to spend a whole podcast, I think, talking about, because I'm with you on that. It doesn't need to just mirror the Sunday morning formal worship service that's taking place. Greg, I know you wanted to add to it.
Yeah, and going back to that, and it made me think of it when you're talking about drawing and art, Brad, but when we were doing a series recently where for the small group time, you don't always necessarily have to have a traditional small group. We were trying to build in experiences that they could share together in their small groups that were related to the teaching. So we did a lesson on visual art. What does God have to do with visual art? And so then they were tasked in their small groups to create some visual art.
Wow.
And I was with some of our older guys, and let's just say it was interesting. But we had a great time, and then we had them on poster boards, and then we stuck them all over the youth house, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And we did something for also performance art, and basically trying to weave it in. And then we did one on music, and so then you're listening to music and you're talking about the music. So it's tactile and it's multi-sensory. And it's engaging them in conversation about what you've been teaching, and not everybody's structured that way, where you have discussion time after large group, so that may not work for everybody. But I think feeling like you're kind of like a mad scientist a little bit in the learning laboratory, just tinkering around and trying some things. I mean, obviously there's some guardrails and there's some things to consider,
sure.
But I think if you're, as much as you can weave it all together, it's kind of like, I think remember Richie Sessions talking about, he writes sermons like he would write songs. And so thinking about whether it's a retreat or a whole youth group evening, it's all parts of the same song, and it'll be more powerful for students, and they won't even know it because it's hitting them, And so I think that's kind of fun, trying to figure out how to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, look, we've got about 5 minutes left. I know y'all have seen the questions. There's a lot of questions on there. Are there any questions you just kind of want to give a brief thought question, answer to, response to, anything that jumps out on that? Brad, what's your question?
Yeah, so I think a few of the questions were aimed at kind of how do you find rest in ministry?
Yeah.
Or how do you separate work from your life? And so a few things that I've done, and these are just really practical things, but when I'm not on a trip, I delete email from my phone.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm not looking at emails at 6 o'clock at night, and I don't feel the pressure of having to respond when I'm not in the office. And I think I've even put in one of my signatures in all the emails that I send, if you need me, you can call me on my phone, but I'll reply to emails and whatever between 9 and 5, just so parents and people I work with know that. I also don't text anybody that I work with after 5 o'clock on a weekday.
Nice.
And so unless it's super rare if I ever have to do that.
Yeah.
And so just trying to, being able to separate, I think the phone makes it really hard because you've got your life wrapped up in it, but you also have your work wrapped in it. It almost feels like you can never get any rest.
Yes.
And so as much as I go through various stages, but as much as I can turn my phone off when I'm at home, because probably 95% of my life on my phone is work related. That's super helpful. But even just finding rest, finding something that you love, and just finding time to do it, and taking breaks. We all, I've tried to get in the good habit of, on my day off, I don't go see students for lunch. On my day off, I'm not going to committee meetings. It's my day off. Obviously, there's some times where you have to deviate from that path. But, if you deviate from the path, make it up somewhere else. And so, I know if I'm going to be at church until 9 o'clock at night, I have the freedom to go in at noon. And I think having a good relationship with whoever you work with, or whoever oversees you, is super important, just so they know where you're at and what you're doing. Because, you could work 60 to 80-hour weeks doing youth ministry. And so you need to for me, it's riding bikes. I love riding bikes. And so I'll wake up at 4:45 in the morning and go for a bike ride. And I need that. Just to get through the day. And so just finding what you like and setting off time to do it is super important.
Yeah, there are so many good things you said. I mean, going back to deleting email off of your phone, I've done that before, and just a search engine as well. Just trying to make your smartphone a dumb phone. I think there's an article that kind of walks through steps on doing that. Can just be a practical way to help you kind of leave work at the office a little bit. So that's good. Greg, what are some thoughts? A question that jumped out at you.
Well, I'll just say this one because it's pretty relevant right now, but. Where I lost it on the sheet here, but it's something about how do you leave your church in a healthy way?
Oh yeah,
So I'm in the middle of that right now. Moving to a new call and out of youth ministry after a long time, and I'll just say one thing about that, and this is just where I'm at right now. I'm in the middle of making sense of that. I think just sitting in the tension of people's grief. Of your leaving. Like, my temptation is when students are sad or people are sad, it's to say, well, kind of try to paint a silver lining on it. But just letting people be sad, letting people bless you, also grieve yourself, and really take the time and make the space, and trying to care for myself well in the middle of it. The advice that I've gotten recently about this is, which is hard for me. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I'm living the future, and I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to keep going. And the advice I received was stay for the applause and let things end. And that's hard for me because, like I just said, but really I'm blessing others and letting people bless you, grieve the change, be present. That's one of my things every day I'm writing my journal is I'm wanting to be attentive and available and unhurried when I'm with people, and just really making time for folks and for rest along the way, because it's exhausting to make a change and make a transition. And again, that's not even mentioning perhaps you're going through a transition and there's been really painful parts of it too. So the more traumatic or painful it is, the more you need to be attentive to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And appreciating the good and things you can give thanks for, but also the things that that hurt or that you're processing. So making time and space and make sure you're talking about that with people. But yeah, that's something on the list that jumped out just because that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Greg. I know that is that's fresh, and you're processing it. Maybe even a few months down the road, we can get you back on to kind of process on the other side of it and kind of let us know how that goes. But Brad, Greg, you guys have students at this conference, and you're tired and you're busy. And I know there's basketball tournaments today and night out tonight. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on. So I appreciate y'all just taking a few minutes to sit down and to share the wisdom the Lord has given you through your years of youth ministry. So I hope you guys have a good day.
Buy without money. Oh, come and feast without pay. For the King has opened his banquet hall to the beggar, the outcast, and the slave. For the King has opened his banquet hall to the beggar, the outcast,